Well, welcome everybody to day 2 of College Week. Today we're talking about the important steps that juniors and seniors need to take in their college process. And I'm so happy that I have an expert in the house here with me today to discuss this important topic. Please meet Renee Minnich. Renee, welcome.
Thanks so much, Anne. I'm really excited to be here today.
I'm excited that you're here. So let me share with everybody out there a little bit about Renee. She is a college consultant here with me at Educational Connections. And prior to coming to the company, she worked at RPI, which is a school specifically for kids applying to STEM, sorry, RIT. I said that incorrectly.
That's okay. People confuse those two
I
all the
didn't mean to say
time.
that.
No worries.
Rochester Institute of Technology. I got my letters confused, but it's such a wonderful STEM school for students that are interested a lot in engineering, but also other subjects too. So she's been in admissions for 28 years. And what's even more amazing is that Renee has reviewed over 20,000 applicants, and she really knows what it takes to say you're admitted to help students standing out. So Renee, tell us a little bit about what you do with students day in and day out in your current role.
Sure. So I transitioned now to being a full-time college consultant, and I have a ton of admissions background, and I loved my time there. But I really wanted to kind of switch to the other side of the desk for a little bit. So right now, I work day to day with students from 8th grade all the way through 12th grade. And what I'm doing with each of them is very different because they're in a different part of their journey in their college search process. With the earlier grades, because I do know we have some parents of younger students on, I typically work a lot on personal narrative, course selection, career exploration, and really starting to talk about colleges and what they might want out of a college. With 10th through 12th grades, I'm really digging into the college search process, covering everything from creating a college list, drafting resumes, writing college essays, which I'm working on a lot of college essays right now, all the way through helping a student create a timeline for application submission and getting them all in on time. So for every student I work with, from the day I start with them until usually around November 1st of their senior year, I make a timeline so that we can break everything that needs to be done down into smaller steps and we don't have to do everything all at once. I think this really helps create a process that's less overwhelming for the students.
Yeah, I bet it sure does. Thanks for that, Renee. So let's talk a little bit about the fall game plan because here we are, the start of school, and there's certain things students can be doing. Give us an overview, and then we're going to dive into each one.
Sure. So with students joining me right now, students I'm working with, all of a sudden everything is like an emergency because they're heading back to school and they're really switching gears from thinking the way they do in the summer to, oh my gosh, I now have to think about school and colleges. So there's a lot of things that can be done for every grade level right now that can get you organized and then make a plan for what you need to accomplish. You know, there's so many different fun activities, especially in junior and senior year, and you want to enjoy them. So you want to make sure that you have time set aside to work on college search and college applications so that we can ease up on all these competing priorities in the fall.
Makes sense, Renee. All right, so let's dig in. Tell us a little bit about this section and how important it is to create an, standout application and a resume.
Sure. So when I'm working with students from 8th grade on, I always have them I create a Google Doc for them to track their activities and their awards. And I've actually added travel in this year too, because so many students have a lot of travel experience and that really adds to their personal narrative as well. So I send a Google Doc to them and then they write down everything that they've done in high school from 9th grade on. And then we kind of talk about it. We look at it and see what a student has done and we make sure that it's well-rounded and then decide how to present this as part of their application. It's so helpful to use a document like this because I guarantee you'll participate in something in 9th and 10th grade and you're going to forget about it by the time you're a senior. So I like starting this early on. We can also sometimes pull people who might be good references off of this list. And every student I work with, I have them create a resume as part of their application. And we use the Google Doc of activities to help create that resume. And resumes are fantastic. You can give them to admissions officers when you meet them, when you're on campus, if you're going to interview. You can give them to your recommenders so that they have a better idea of all the things that you've done outside of the classroom. And because schools don't require one, the fact that you actually make a resume and submit it kind of shows that you're a student who will take the extra step.
I love that idea of creating a resume. And I know that all of the other college counselors on staff do that too, because it is certainly a differentiator.
I agree. You know, there's a lot of ways that students can stand out as part of the application process. And I always really liked when a student submitted a resume because it did show me that they were a student who were organized and that they were taking the extra step, not taking the easy way out. There are certain things I recommend to students when creating a resume. Try to keep it to a page. I also like to recommend like strong action words like organize, I designed, I managed, I researched. And you know, that's why I tell students, show, don't tell. Don't just say you tutored students, say I tutored 10 students. So they have an idea of how much you committed yourself to that. And use a clean, readable format. Doesn't need to be like flashy with all different colors and designs. Something that is easy to read and skim through as an admissions officer is always very, very helpful. And you know, have someone proofread it and offer you suggestions. You know, I think when you're doing something like this and it's an add-on to your application, you really want it to be well received. As an admissions officer, I always would look through resumes because the Common App activity section is just very, very bland and very limiting. You have 150 characters to describe the activity you're in. So when you create your own resume, you don't have those limitations and you can really talk freely about things that you have done that you're passionate about.
Wait, did you say words or characters?
Characters. So you have 150 characters to describe your activity.
That's not much.
Not much.
I can see why the resume would be helpful. I love that you help kids create it. That's awesome, Renee. All right,
Sure.
so let's move on and talk about campus visits.
So campus visits are one of my favorite things. I always tell students nothing beats a campus visit. I think every family that I've worked with has heard me say that. You can look at colleges online in their brochures and do their webinars and all of those things, but you just don't know kind of the vibe or the feeling of the campus or if it's a good fit for you unless you go visit the campus. And every family does this at a different time. Some will do it starting sophomore year, junior year, some wait until after they've been admitted to a college. So all of that is okay, but I do recommend that students do campus visits as part of their college journey. Many families want to do visits over the summer, which is a little bit of a tough time because the campus is not in session and you want to get that feeling for campus. And, you know, doing campus visits also really energizes students a little bit about going to college. So it's nice to see them when they get there and they're like, I can see myself fitting in here. So I have a few tips for campus visits. The first is to call ahead and schedule ahead of time. Sometimes you're on a road trip and you're like, oh my goodness, we're right by this, this campus, and you drop in, and that's completely fine. But if you can call ahead of time, they can walk you through all the different options that you can do while on campus. You can meet with an admissions officer. Sometimes that's individually, sometimes it's in a group. You can take campus tours. You can take residence halls tours. You can take department tours if you're interested in a specific department. You can meet with faculty in a department. And then other students are also interested in maybe working with an academic support service office, and maybe you want to meet with them if you have learning differences that you would like support with, or you're interested in a sport and you want to meet with a coach. All of those pieces can be a really part of a really valuable visit to a campus, and you don't want to just go there and take a tour and miss out on all those other opportunities as well. If you don't have an appointment, it is okay to stop in and take a campus tour, but always check in with the admissions office and let them know you're there. They track that you took the time to come visit, and for those schools that track demonstrated interest, that's important. Another tip I have is ask questions. Ask as many as you can, especially to the student ambassadors. We have always told our student ambassadors when I worked in admissions to be truthful when you answer questions. If there's something that you don't like about campus, this student probably won't either. So it's okay to share those things. And everybody wants something different out of a campus. But when you're asking those questions, steer away from things like, what is the student to faculty ratio? Because that really isn't giving you a lot of information. Ask instead, Are the classes all taught by professors? How accessible are the professors if you have questions outside of class? Another great question to ask is, what do you think every student needs to know before attending here? Or why did you specifically decide to attend here or work here if you're meeting with an admissions officers? These are really great open-ended questions that you can get more information out of. The next section is about experience campus. Do everything you can. Eat in the dining hall, take the residence hall tour, check out the gym, wander around and get a good feel for things. And also check out the surrounding area. I mean, this isn't just the college you're going to attend, but also the area that you might be in for the next 4 years. And I have two final tips. Arrive early, wear comfortable shoes. Because that is really like college campuses are notoriously difficult to navigate. When you find the parking lot, you can't find the building. Sometimes you can't even find the parking lot. So arrive early so you're not stressed. You don't want to be running in for an admissions interview all flustered because you came in a little bit late. And wear comfortable shoes because those campus tours are often an hour plus walking around. And the last step, reflect post-visit. This is for me probably one of the most important things, especially if you're visiting multiple schools in a row. I guarantee by the end of the week, you're going to be like, did RPI or RIT tell me that? Because it all kind of blends in together. So I recommend that students at the end of the day, at dinner, probably mom gets out a notebook and they write down, what they liked about that school, what they didn't like, if they think they can fit in there. I mean, this is just a great time to debrief and then have some things to reference back later on.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. All right. So this is what everybody wants to know. It's about crafting a list. First of all, how many colleges should be on a student's list? And how do you craft a list that really has a balance instead of like being, which is very common, a top heavy list?
Yeah, so the top heavy list is very common. A number of the students that come to us with the top heavy list, and a lot of the work I do is adding a few more of those match and likely schools in. So let me address your first question first, the number of schools. My recommendation to students is 8 to 12. And that's because it allows us to put a couple schools in the reach category, a couple schools in the likely category, and then a number of schools in the match category. I will tell you though that I have students who have 6 schools on their list, and I have a student who has 22 schools on her list. So it does depend on the student and it does depend on the makeup of your list. If you have 6 schools on your list, they can't all be reach schools because you really are not setting yourself up to have a lot of options down the line. So the first thing you do in creating a balanced list is do research. And this actually takes quite a bit of time. Research the schools, learn about which ones might be the best fit for you. The bonus here is that there is a tremendous amount of information online about schools that's available to students. There's recorded admissions webinars, there's tours, and of course, as a college counselor, I have a lot of firsthand knowledge about schools, so I can often add and suggest different schools to students, depending on what they're interested in and their academic background. So when I meet with students to kind of start the process, I always ask, what are the schools on your list? And they often either have a top heavy list like we discussed, or they have the same list that all of their friends do. And every student is unique, and their college search and their list should be unique as well. So this isn't a process where it can be the same as your friends. This is a process where it should be different. So I work to block out the noise basically from the friends and maybe suggest schools that they haven't considered that might be a really good fit. So the reason we call it a balanced list is because we want schools to fall in all 3 categories: reach, match, likely. And when I tell a student a school is a reach school for them, many times it's not a reflection of the student, it's because the school is so competitive that it's a reach school for everybody. So I want to bring some realistic expectations of what their admissibility might be. And there's so many different colleges out there that students can have fantastic experiences at, both academically and socially. So I'm going to work with them to suggest other schools they should consider to put in those other 2 categories. And the key here is really setting yourself up to have options. You want to have explored a variety of schools. You want to have schools in all 3 categories. So at the end of the day, you're less stressed through the admissions process because you know you have schools in the match and likely category where you can expect to receive some admissions offers.
That makes sense. I love the idea of a balance list. I'm wondering if you can give some personal examples. It seems like a lot of kids these days want to go to big football schools. They want to go to, a large public university in the South. Not always, but sometimes. And
Sure.
like you said, they often have similar schools to their friends. How are students receptive when you say, "Oh, I love these schools, and I also am thinking of this school for you"?
Right,
Can you
right.
think of examples like that? Does that
You know,
happen?
and that happens all the time, all the time. So they come with this list because this is what they think they want. And I often ask a lot of questions like, have you visited? Or why do you want that type of school? Or what's important to you in a college? And sometimes when they list something that's important to them, like, I want a small class size of like 20, and then they're talking about these large schools, there's a little disconnect. So I want to make sure that their set of must-haves for college matches their college list. And then we'll kind of work through it together to determine, okay, is this list of schools that you have realistic based on your academic background? So kind of talking through that. And then I always ask them point blank, okay, is this list complete for you? Or would you be open to some suggestions from me? And then I will share some suggestions. And I always tell them, if you don't like the school I suggest, it's fine. You're not offending me in any way. I just want to expose you to some different things that maybe you hadn't considered earlier. Um, so I had a student last year actually who had a very top heavy list and had one school in particular that she had her heart set on. But we explored other schools, some smaller schools in the Northeast, and she did apply to them. She ultimately got waitlisted at her dream school, did not ever get offered admission, but did get admitted scholarship and honors offers from the two other schools we added to her list. And suddenly they were at the top of her list instead of her dream school, and ended up at one of the schools and was super excited. In fact, I was just thinking about her this week, thinking, I wonder if she's moved back to campus and how things are going.
Oh,
So I need to reach out to her mom to check.
I'm just
So
curious, what were the schools?
she wanted to go to University of Chicago, like Illinois, Urbana, and she ended up going to, I don't, it was Mount Holyoke. I have to remember which school it was in Massachusetts. It was a much smaller, very, very different school.
And Mount Holyoke's an amazing school. It's pretty
Yeah.
competitive.
Yes, it was. And she did well. But it wasn't a school that was even on her list. And
Hmm.
she was a very strong student, but her list was very top heavy.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Renee. All right, so let's talk about another part of the application that can help kids stand out, and that's having to do with testing the SAT and ACT.
Sure. So when a student is taking test scores, right now I'm talking about this with a lot of my seniors. What are your test scores? Are we submitting them to each school? And there's a lot of questions right now around SATs and ACTs. We know that ACT is changing quite a bit. In fact, we have a webinar later this week on Thursday, I think, that we're going to be covering a lot of this information. So the first question I get from families is, when should I actually take these tests? Many students will take them the fall of their junior year and then again in the spring of their junior year. Once we have that set of scores, many students will decide to take them again in the summer and then possibly in the fall of their senior year. But I do recommend taking them as early as possible. What's happening now for some of the seniors who are still taking testing is that we're holding their application submissions until we get all the testing back to decide if they should submit test scores or not to each school. I recommend summers for test prep. Ideally, summer between sophomore and junior year is a great time to do that. And then you can do some test prep between junior and senior year as well. But the benefit of doing test prep in the summer is that you don't have the competing priorities of school. So that's why I recommend it typically during that time. And then the next question I get is, should I submit test scores or not? This comes up all the time. And it's a little bit of a complicated answer. Most people think I'm going to say yes or no. But, I will look at a student's academic background to make that determination, as well as the averages for the schools that they are applying to. So if a student's grades are lower day to day than you would like them to be, and you've done well on testing, that testing can be a nice addition to your application, and it can show potential to be more successful academically than you may have been in the past. If your grades are strong day to day and the student's also done well in standardized testing, then it's another positive to your application. So I work with each student to look at the testing they have, their academic background, and the schools that they are applying to determine if they are going to submit test scores. And that might mean yes to one school and no to another school. So it's not a blanket yes or no across the board. We will talk a little bit more about this on Thursday too. So if anybody needs some additional information, I know we're going to be covering that, and Pete's going to be joining us to cover all the changes that have been happening with the ACT and lots of moving parts in testing right now.
Yeah, and Renee, just to round that out, if parents out there, if you have a current junior, this is a really great time to start test prep if they haven't taken a test. So you definitely want to do prep before a test, see what their score is, prep again, and take it again. In general, kids are taking the test at least twice, sometimes three times. But I agree, starting in the fall is a great idea, Renee.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I actually met with a family this morning, and the student wanted to take, excuse me, his SATs for the fifth time. And I said to them, what is the test prep you've been doing? And he's been doing it all on his own. And what I recommended was to having a test prep counselor, because I'm like, if you keep just repeating the same thing, you really can't expect the scores to change that much. If you want to make a change, then you also need to make a change in your prep. And so sometimes switching to doing on your own to a test prep counselor, and I always recommend one-on-one for that, that can really change the tide in your test scores.
Yeah, for sure, Renee. Thank you for that. All right, so let's talk about the essay, also called the personal statement.
Yeah, so we were just talking about this at the beginning. Sometimes it's called the essay, sometimes it's called the personal statement. Students know the word Common App essay, but in truth and reality, it really is a personal statement. So this is different than what you would write for an English class or a history class. This is a very reflective personal statement that you're sharing with colleges. I personally love the college essay. I'm working with all of my seniors right now, and finalizing college essays and all the supplemental essays that schools might have. And I just really enjoy them because it's a free space for students to share who they are, what they want to become, what's important to them, how they can add to campus. And it's 650 words, so it's not a tremendous amount of words, but it is very, very impactful. As a former admissions officer, I would always read the application first and then the essay before I even looked at the student's transcript, because I wanted to get a sense of who the student was before I looked at them academically. I can't say that every school does this, but that's the way I actually was trained. I worked for 3 different schools, and at all 3 schools, we looked at applications in that way. So, the next question is, I don't know what to write about. I'm not different than anyone else. How am I unique? So I sit down and kind of talk with students through the process to draw out some essay topics that they are excited about. The whole point of the Common App essay or an essay for college is to share something about yourself. So you want to write about something you're passionate about. You don't want to write something you think the admissions office wants to hear. If you do that, it doesn't come through as authentic, and it's really, really hard to write. So we normally will brainstorm some topics together. And then once we land on one, I help them create a bullet point list of what they will include in the essay. I have a great document that I can give that lays out what the first paragraph should be, second and third. So once they look at that, it becomes a little bit less overwhelming. And sometimes I tell them, just write the first paragraph and send it to me, because writing a whole draft is overwhelming. Writing a paragraph, anybody can get started. But when I'm working with them, my goal is to always let their authentic voice shine through. I certainly will help with grammar and edits to make sure it's well written, but it really needs to be in their voice, which is the important part. Some schools also have supplemental essays, so it's great when we can tackle some of these ahead of time and early in the year, just to make sure that we have time to get through all of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Renee. That was super helpful. I'm wondering if you've ever had a student where they've written the essay in their English class, or like they have a topic that they're really stuck on. And then you're thinking, I've seen in admissions, you've seen this topic many times, or this isn't going to help you stand out. What do you do?
Right.
I mean, I'm assuming you've had those situations quite a
Both
few times.
situations happen all the time. Many English teachers will have students write essays at the end of junior year, which to be honest, I very much appreciate. There are many students who would procrastinate on that essay all summer long and may never write it if they didn't write it in that English class. But there are many times that I look at those essays and they are not written as a college personal statement. They are written as an English essay. So what they're sharing is often covering more on the topic than on the student and who they are. So there's a few students that I had this summer that came to me and like, I'm all set, I wrote my essay. And then we actually spent most of the summer revising that essay to make it more appropriate for a college application. And so I appreciate when students are receptive to that feedback. But yes, the other thing is I get topics all the time about, um, I want to write about this. And I think, oh no, I've read a million essays on this topic. So I share that with the student right up front. I'll say, okay, if you feel passionate about this, you can write about this topic, but I will let you know it's a very common topic. So if you are going to write about it, let's talk about how we make your essay stand out from all the others who may write about this. So this year I have 3 students writing about music. Music is a very common topic. And they're, I want to write music. I'm so passionate about my music. And so they're all 3 went different directions after we brainstormed. One is talking about how music helped him connect with his parents because he didn't have a great relationship with his parents, but they had some common love of the same types of music. Another student is writing about her piano playing and how she hit a plateau and how she sought out new instructors to help her get to the next level. And then I have another student who traveled around Europe with his band and played, and really is writing this beautiful essay about how music unified his band with the people in the countries he visited, even though they didn't all speak English. They were all passionate about the music that was being played. So that's an example of like similar topic, but how do we take a different path down it? So when a student brings up something I've never read, I'm like, oh my, this is exciting. Let's let's dive into this because that, after reading 25,000 essays, to see something that's unique and a different topic is really exciting to me.
I bet it's refreshing. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Renee. All right. And so I'd love to share what we're doing the rest of the week. I'm excited for day 3. Renee will be back with us and also Kristen. And we'll be talking about how to stand out when you may not have the best grades or perfect test scores. And what does that look like for you? And so that is tomorrow. And by the way, a lot of parents write and ask about a recording. We will send the recording out tomorrow, but look for more information on tomorrow's topic beyond the numbers. And then, as Renee mentioned, on Thursday, we'll be talking about the new revamped ACT, how that compares to the SAT, and how to create your child's testing calendar and process to help them improve their application. All right, Renee, thank you so much. I would love to bring in Ann Stewart. Ann Stewart, oh, sorry, Jennifer. I know, Jennifer, you're going to jump on. You're one of our program managers and talking to parents every day about the whole college process. And in your role in talking to parents, they often share with you things that they're thinking about, and you share with them ways that they can go about the college process. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit on that.
Sure. Thank you, Renee, and thank you, Anne. I feel like I tell my families all the time that I learn from these just as much as they do, and that is true. But I mean, really, all kids are different and all parents are different, and they'll come, call in with different needs, but everybody wants the best thing for their child. A lot of times students will come with a lot done and feel like look at everything I've accomplished, but can't shake the feeling that they don't have the glue to cohesively form, the thread of the narrative. Sometimes students are the first one in the family to go to college, and parents are like looking at the process thinking, this is so different. And it is, it's very different. So it's very helpful to tee up, the firstborns to make sure that there's clarity there. And sometimes a lot of students don't know what they want to pursue. And I know even Kristen echoed this yesterday in her presentation. So there's just so much work that I know Renee, you and everybody else does to really help students kind of sift through that and figure out, well, what do you want to do, and put a narrow, finer point on things that they may want to pursue, or at least X out stuff they know they don't want to. But for sure, the family is not only what's best for their child, but they know that they don't have the perspective that you have, Renee, as an evaluator or other counselors. And so that's just been uniquely what makes you invaluable to the families.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And I know parents can schedule a call with you if they're interested in learning more about our programs, and that you can learn about their student, make a few suggestions, see if we're a match for what they're looking for, and then link them with just the right counselor. Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. So if we can help your family, please feel free to reach out and set up a call with either Kathy, Jennifer, who you just met, or Ann Stewart. All right, so let's go to Q&A, because I see a bunch of questions, Renee, and I want to make sure we get to as many as we can before the end today.
Okay.
All right, Melissa, I'd love to bring you on. What are you hearing out there?
All right, so our first question is, could you please explain the difference again between a match versus a likely school?
Oh, that's a good question. Sorry, I didn't go into that in depth. So a match school is a school where a student's academic background and metrics are very similar to what the school has admitted in the past. So we typically will get an average GPA, middle 50% of SAT and ACT scores. And the software that we use, College Planner Pro, also includes a wonderful pie chart for the GPA. It doesn't just give us a GPA, but it also says for every section of the GPA, how many students they admitted. So 2.5 to 2.75, this is how many students that school admitted. So instead of just seeing these averages, which sometimes can be tough, you get to see a broader range. So I put schools in a match category if a student is lining up academically with the students that the school has admitted in the past. If I'm seeing them exceed those metrics, then I would put it in a likely category. And, I don't put a school in a likely category lightly, because once I put it in a likely category, that student assumes like, oh, I'm in to this school. So I really will talk through why I put schools in each category so that students can understand why they fell in there. And sometimes they'll say, hey, this is a match leaning toward a likely, or this is a match leaning toward a reach, just so they really have an understanding of what their list looks like. But the goal is you should have them in all three categories.
Thank you, Renee. All right, next question is about SAT scores. So if a student's SAT scores fall below the 25th percentile at a highly competitive school, but they are significantly higher than the average at their high school, does that give any weight? Should they still submit?
Interesting question. So I don't really take the high school part into consideration. I would take more the student's actual transcript in reflection to the SAT score. So that's what I would want to know. Based on these SAT scores, even though they're lower, are they in line with what the student is academically, or are they showing more potential than the academic transcript does? And then I also look to see how many students at that college submitted test scores and enrolled the previous year. Because if you're seeing a school that is test optional, but they're indicating that 80% of their enrolled freshmen submitted test scores, that school's really test score preferred. So there's a lot of kind of factors that you have to weigh in when you're looking at test scores and deciding on submission.
All right, and another test score question is about homeschooling students who don't receive grades. How does that weigh into their test scores?
That's actually a great question. I've worked with a lot of homeschool students in my past, and every homeschool student comes to an admissions office with a little bit of a different transcript. Sometimes it's something that's actually done through the school. Sometimes it's just done by the parent. At times there's grades, at times there's not grades. If there's a homeschool student who has taken any dual enrollment or things through community colleges, that's helpful. I would recommend for those students to definitely submit test scores, because it really gives a piece of solid information for the admissions office to go on when they're making that decision. There are colleges that will require test scores from homeschool students, and some will not. So you have to look at each of your schools individually. But my recommendation would to be, because you're not submitting anything with hard academic metrics, that you take advantage of that test score and provide that to the school so they have some indication of your academic potential.
Great. And since we're talking about test scores, we have a question about the PSAT. Anne and Renee, do you recommend preparing for the PSAT or just going in blind and taking it cold?
I'd be interested to hear your answer on this, Anne, too. I have an opinion, but I think this is a little bit of a different answer for everybody.
Well, I don't think it's necessary unless you're a very high flyer and there's a chance when you're a junior that you could be a national merit qualifier. You do not need to prep, and that's a very, very small percentage of the population. But on the other hand, sometimes kids, they're so worried and apprehensive about taking a big stakes standardized test that they're like, I just want prep because I'm going to just feel so much better when I walk into the test. In that case, it's perfectly fine, but you don't need to take prep to increase your score because colleges don't see that information.
Yeah, I actually really agree, Anne. I tell students it's called the PSAT for a reason. It's the practice SAT. Like, that is your practice. So you don't have to prep for a practice. But that being said, I have two students who are doing test prep before the PSAT, who both have test anxiety, both feel like talking to someone ahead of time, seeing what the questions might be like, will help them prepare mentally to take this exam and truly use it as a preparation so that by the time they're taking the SATs, that they're feeling even more confident. So I respected that. I think both families had really good reasons, and I connected them with, I think it was Jennifer and Ann Stewart who worked with them on, connecting with a test prep coach to make sure that they were feeling confident about going into the exam. But I don't think you have to do test prep for PSAT, but there are certain circumstances if you feel that that would support your student best, then sure, it's not going to hurt.
Great. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the essay. What are some additional personal statement topics that you would consider overused or that you've read too many of?
Yeah, a lot of mission trips, community service trips. I learned teamwork from playing on a sports team, coming back from a sports injury. Those are all very common. I would also say, depending on what major you're interested in, there can be certain themes. I read engineering applicants for many, many years. I can't tell you how many Lego essays I read, like Lego essays all the time. So be kind of thoughtful of that and think about how, will other students who are interested in what I'm interested in be writing the same thing? And actually, let me add a quick story in about essays, if you don't mind. I started working with a new student this week, and he said to me, I'm on my third draft of my essay. And I said, okay, great. Who's been helping you? And he said, I've had 2 peer reviews on essays. And I was like, oh, great. Did your English teacher set up that you're, swapping essays? And he said, no, my friends and I just all got together and we thought, okay, let's help each other out. So we all wrote our essays and then we shared them, and then we rewrote them, and then we shared them again with a different person in our friend group, and we gave each other feedback. I was like, that is a great idea. I love that. So there's lots of different ways to approach essays, and that's a way that you can see, hey, my friends we're all writing about the same thing. So if you're seeing some of those common topics pop up, you're going to want to shift gears a little bit.
All right. Next question from, let's see, about IB and AP. Can you explain how IB students are reviewed differently than AP students, and what are their benefits of choosing one program over the other?
Okay, that's actually a great question. And not all schools offer both, so you don't always have the choices there. When I was at admissions, we would look at IP, AB, dual enrollment, kind of all on the same level, like really a little bit of a higher level coursework, sometimes can receive college credit for that. And then, we would weight that even higher than we would an honors course. So it would be like a an average course and then an honors course and then AP IB, dual enrollment or a community college. Like that was kind of the highest level of coursework that we could see. But even within IB, you have different levels of high level and standard level. So you can't really blanket say that one is better than another. It depends on what you're pursuing, what classes you're selecting. Are you selecting standard level or high level? Specifically in math, there is one math class that counts for pre-calc that's at the high level, but the standard level doesn't. So there are different factors in there you need to think about and also make decisions in correlation with what major you were selecting in college, because you may have different requirements in high school as far as course selection. So I don't know that I have an easy, yes, you should do this, or no, you should do that, or what's better. It really is more individual to the student. And for every student that I work with, we talk about course selection starting in January for the next year. What courses are available? What have you taken? What's the next step? What level is appropriate for you to take that's going to challenge you, but you can also be successful in? So I will work with the students in making that determination on what to take that following fall. I'm still getting questions right now from students as they're going back and their schedules are getting finalized. Oh no, I can't get in this. Should I take this instead? But that's something you'll want to either talk about with your counselor at high school or your college counselor if you decide to pursue counseling. They can help you navigate that process.
Thank you. All right, you spoke about the resume. Where exactly do you submit that in the Common App?
Great question. So some colleges will have the ability for you to submit it right within the Common App. It'll say resume optional, and you can submit it right through there. If the college doesn't have that as part of it, I recommend students email it right to the admissions office and say, can you please include this in my application?
Great. All right, and I think we only have time for one or two more questions. Sandra is asking how you should determine whether to take the ACT or the SAT, or should kids take both?
Great question. And do you want to tackle that, or do you think we should try to encourage families
Sure.
to go
Well, we're
on
definitely going
Thursday
to talk
too?
about, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty involved answer. We're going to talk about that on Thursday, but I'd say in general, since the changes to the ACT are just coming out this month, many families we work with are going with, if they were pretty happy with the PSAT score, they're familiar with the College Board and their offerings, they've kind of like stayed in that lane with the SAT, and because it's kind of a known thing. But if you take a PSAT and you're like, wow, this test isn't for me, then certainly you can consider the ACT. But really, schools do not favor one test over another. And you don't need to take both tests. You can pick one test, study for that, and put your efforts into one test instead of splitting your focus, and just take that test 2 or 3 times.
All right, and one last question, Renee. Jennifer is asking, there's so many online resources, it all feels overwhelming. Do you have some great resources for parents who are just getting started?
I guess that might depend on what getting started means, because I do have students all the way to 8th grade. So, I recommend that, first of all, it is a stressful process and it can be overwhelming. But if you start early, you plan, you research, take advantage of the resources that are out there, that you certainly can navigate the process. But, I don't know that I have one specific recommendation that I tell students to use, because they're all looking for different things. I have a student who wants to major in musical theater, and I have another student who wants glass blowing, and then I have a microelectronic engineer, and how I would go about those searches are very, very different. So I think the right thing to do is sit down with your child and talk about criteria. What's important to you in a school? What should we be looking for? How far do you want to go from home? What type of campus do you want? Urban, suburban, rural? And that kind of gives you an idea of where to start and what colleges to look at. I will tell you, a lot of time is spent doing research and looking at schools. I might provide a list to a family, and I'll do like 3 or 4 bullet points about what I think is important or why I picked that school for the student. But then they often will do that kind of research online. So I would start early. I would do some investigation. And the other thing I recommend is, if you are just at the beginning of the search process, look around what's close to you. What types of colleges are within a 2 to 4 hour radius of you? Something you could do a day trip at. And if you don't have an idea what type of college you want, use that to make some determinations. Go visit a big school, a small school, someplace that's close to home, maybe something a little farther from home, a liberal arts school, a tech school. And that might help you kind of narrow down your search a little bit more without committing to flying across the country to see something. If you've got some schools relatively close to you, that's often a great place to start.
Great. Thank you, Renee. Anne?
Thanks, Melissa. Renee, thank you so much for being my guest today and to lending your
course.
expertise on such an important topic for juniors and seniors. Parents and students, I hope you found this to be helpful. We'll send out the recording tomorrow. It was a pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope to see you again tomorrow and then on Thursday. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.